All right, guys. Gaza War day 465. And I cannot say tonight the usual thing that I've been saying, no end in sight. It's not quite true. Um, because there is an end in sight. And it's funny. 2 days ago, I said, one of these days, one of these ceasefires is going to actually happen. And I didn't necessarily think it would be this one, but um, there does appear to be an end in sight. I'm going to come back tomorrow. I'll keep this one short. Let me say just a few things because typical of wars historically, they are always, there's always an ramping up of intensity, and you don't have one side seeking peace or seeking a ceasefire until the threshold is reached for them. And so that was always what we were looking for in terms of trying to understand what it would take for the Israelis to stop. And it is the nature of attrition, that it's an accumulation over time. But some of the operations that we've seen in Gaza over the past few days have been bigger. The operations in Beit Hanun, in particular, North Gaza, where the Israelis first went in, have been large scale losses on the Israelis. I mean, for the Israelis, it would be like there was a report I read today that there were 25 Israelis that were holed up in a building, and they were all killed or wounded, and then the rescue force was hit by a mine. And there was a complaint that I saw from Israelis soldiers that were saying they're watching us with cameras. They have uncountable amounts of explosives. Where do you think they're getting those Israeli soldiers? And they were demanding that the Israelis approach the conflict differently. They wanted, as if there's some tactical adaptation that they can do, which there isn't. And I think probably their demand may have reached the Israeli command, who realized there isn't anything they can do, because the what they wanted was to have more firepower before they move soldiers into the area. Um, if you understood the way every other military fights wars, including the Americans, you would realize that is not something that there's you the ratio of firepower to what they do on the ground of the Israeli army is totally unprecedented in human history. And trying to add more firepower and less, relatively speaking, less ground troops is not going to win them the war. And we had 200 soldiers signing some petition saying they didn't want to serve anymore, something along those lines. So the army, I think, grasped the pointlessness of what they were doing, or is starting to grasp the pointlessness of what they're doing. I don't want to talk like there is a ceasefire yet, because we have been fooled many times. The indicators that this is real is that the Israeli media seems to be priming the Israeli public for it. There's real panic from the Israeli media class about this being a surrender to Hamas. Statements like now, statements like now every this open season, the Israeli government has turned every person in this country into a target for Palestinian factions to free their prisoners. So that pathology is evident even in their complaints, that they value holding Palestinian prisoners over freedom for Israelis. This means bringing Israel to its knees and eliminating it as these factions aspire to. So it's an admission, it's an interesting admission that Israel exists because to Israel exists to imprison Palestinians. Nonetheless, that tone, that complaint that Israel is surrendering, that is an indicator that we haven't really seen before. They are complaining about Trump. They're saying Trump has forced us. Trump's put all this pressure on Hamas, but they've ended up forcing us. So those are some real indicators. I think my our friend Bikram Singh Gill on Twitter, he said he wrote an equation today at this afternoon. He said Palestinian resistance in the north of Gaza continuing to fight back and wear down occupation army, plus Trump indicating to Netanyahu that he will not give tens of billions of dollars in military aid to replenish the attritioned Israeli army equals ceasefire. That's interesting because when I read that from Bikram, it occurred to me that maybe the ask from Netanyahu was actually for men. Maybe he was asking rather than asking for money, which is can always be printed. He was asking for troops, and Laith Maroof, who's been on this show, has argued for a long time that there are a lot of mercenaries. We've seen pictures of like Ukrainian mercenaries and others in operating in Gaza and Americans, but and we know that British planes are doing spy work and the Americans are doing spy work and intel and satellites and everything for the genocide. But maybe there are actual Western ground troops, and maybe that is something that might have been too big of an ask. I also think it's possible. I mean, given the timing, Trump it has to have something it has to have had something to do with Trump if this does go through. And Trump um Trump said there'll be hell to pay if the hostages aren't released, but it could be that he meant there'll be hell to pay by everyone, right? I mean, by Israel too, apparently. So yeah, it's hard to imagine that Trump had nothing to do with this given the timing, that it went on for a year and a half with Biden, and before Trump comes into office, if a ceasefire actually happens, it'll definitely be, he'll be able to take credit for it. Democracy in America will be able to take credit for it. They'll be able to say that there is a real alternative. Voting does matter. Your vote does matter. Your voice does matter. All of those things, um, they'll be able to claim that if they do this. I don't. It's my mind is boggled, you guys. I'm having a hard time processing this or believing that it's true, but maybe it is. And so Yemen will be firing missiles until the very end. They fired some just now. Oh, let me just say one more note. Well, I'll end this short video tonight. Tonight's really short video on an analytical note because someone sent me this um, tweet by some kind of Israeli, some kind of Israeli. And what he said is like it showed me what he said showed me something that I find is always true of military people. And this guy's not a military person, but he's clearly got that mentality. He says Israel has capitulated on several factors, allowing for a deal to be reached. Israel has agreed to fully withdraw from Gaza, leaving no troops in Philadelphia corridor. It has agreed to allow Hamas to rule Gaza. As if that's up to them. That is not in the agreement, but there's no mechanism to remove Hamas. Israel has agreed not to exile released prisoners, but let them into Gaza again. Israel has waived its demand for a list of live hostages. It has agreed to allow residents to return to northern Gaza with only symbolic security measures. Also, none of their business. Israel agreed to accept dead bodies in the first stage. These were red lines for Israel at one point. It is remarkable that all of them are being waived. The victory for Hamas is remarkable. Fine, that's the Israeli perception. The reason this happened is clear. Despite incredible victories on the battlefield, Israel has not offered a political program to replace Hamas or remove them from Gaza. It has failed to translate IDF gains into political ones. That has nullified all its military achievements. Now, that is so wrong. That is, you can't begin to say how wrong that is. This was a military failure. This was above all a military failure. The highest, the greatest, the most intense form of struggle is military struggle. And this was a military failure, not a political failure or a diplomatic failure. This was absolutely a military failure by a military that was given everything: more firepower, more resources, more troops per square inch, more diplomatic cover, more permissiveness to commit crimes than anything that's ever happened. And they failed. And if you want to say they failed because of politics, they were not restrained by politics. You could potentially say they were restrained by the fact, not restrained, but they were their genocide was nullified by the fact that they had no point, no goals, no achievable goals, um, no way to win. They had no plan for winning. That's true. They just are a machine for killing, and they kill for some kind of identification and pleasure and the warped society that they've created. But the idea that this was a military success, battlefield successes, where in every hospital in Gaza, blowing up every university in Gaza, killing 100,000 children in Gaza, sniping children in Gaza, are these the battlefield successes? The idea that the delusion of every Israeli on every part of this political spectrum, no matter what their take is, just leaks through everything every one of them says. Now, this particular person says that it's a military success that's nullified by political failure because they couldn't figure out how to replace Hamas. Did Hamas make you stand in the windows? Did Hamas make you step on every landmine? Did Hamas stop you from going into the tunnels and taking casualties? Did Hamas make you rely entirely on massive aerial bombardment to do anything? It's it's a really preposterous analysis, but like, you know, if that's what it takes to get through this, and the result is a ceasefire, then I mean, who are we to question it? So I'll stop there. Um, you have to hang in there because it could be you may not have to hang in there as long as I usually think you have to hang in there when I tell you to hang in there. So I'll leave that, and I will be back tomorrow, and I'll say bye for now. Um, yeah, hang in there till tomorrow. Take care, guys.